You've always been the glue holding this team together, Rowan, but sometimes glue isn't what clients get excited about. Those words. I've replayed them in my head so many times that now they barely sting. Barely. But on that rainy Monday morning, they hit like a fist to the chest. Kind you pretend didn't land while something inside you quietly breaks. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I spent 10 years of my life believing loyalty mattered. That if you worked hard, kept your head down, delivered results, and made other people look good, someone would eventually notice. Someone would reward that kind of steadiness. I was wrong. It was February, one of those days when the sky in Portland hangs low and damp like a wool blanket soaked in cold water. I'd come in early as usual. My inbox had 20 unread emails, and I'd already dealt with half of them before most people had even parked their cars. Then came the Slack message. Sloan T. Can you pop into Conference D at 9:15? Just a quick touch base. I didn't think much of it. Sloan Travers was my boss, creative director at Braverton Design, a boutique branding agency that tried very hard to act like it wasn't slowly becoming corporate. We'd worked together for almost 8 years. She'd mentored me, promoted me twice, once even cried in my office after a messy divorce. So when she asked for a quick meeting, I assumed it was about onboarding a new client or maybe the pitch I'd written over the weekend. Something normal. It wasn't. I walked into Conference Room D, the one with the glass walls and the overpriced Scandinavian chairs, and immediately knew something was wrong. Sloan was already seated, laptop open, lips pressed together in what she probably thought was a reassuring smile. Across from her sat Mallory Easton, her daughter. Mallory was flipping through a leather-bound notebook like she had important notes. She'd been at the agency for less than a year. And yet she already acted like she owned the place, or at least had the deed in escrow. "Rowan," Sloan said as I sat down. "Thanks for making the time." I gave her a polite nod, trying not to let my brain spiral into assumptions. But my pulse was picking up. "We wanted to have this conversation in person," she continued, glancing at Mallory, who gave me a quick, tight-lipped smile. "Because it's important." There was a pause. A long one. Kind that tries to prepare you for impact and ends up doing the opposite. "We're promoting Mallory to Associate Creative Director." Just like that. The air seemed to vanish from the room like someone had cracked a window in a plane mid-flight. My ears buzzed. My spine stiffened. I waited for the rest of the sentence, and "we'd like you to help her adjust, and your new role will be," but nothing came. I looked at Mallory, then back at Sloan. "That's the role I've been holding down since Caitlin left," I said, careful to keep my voice even. "I thought I was being considered for the permanent position." "You were," Sloan said quickly, like it would somehow soften the blow. "We considered a lot of options. But we feel Mallory brings a fresh, dynamic energy that aligns better with our newer clients." "Fresh," I repeated. "She's been here 8 months." "She made an incredible impression on the Nolan pitch," Mallory chimed in helpfully. "That deck really resonated." I looked at her, stunned. "I built that deck." "I know," she said, smiling. "But I brought it to life." I sat back in my chair, heart hammering against my ribs. Suddenly, every late night, every Sunday afternoon I'd spent fine-tuning brand strategy, every time I'd said yes instead of pushing back, it all collapsed into a pile of dust. Sloan leaned forward, clasping her hands. "Rowan, you've been the backbone of this team. You've kept things running, kept morale high, handled crisis after crisis without ever complaining. But sometimes being steady makes people forget you wanted to climb higher. Steady. Reliable. Safe. The words people use when they've decided you're not exciting enough to invest in. They promoted her because she was visible. Loud. Glossy. Because she threw around buzzwords like brand intuition and wore leather pants to client meetings. And I was the quiet one who made sure her slide transitions worked and her timelines made sense. "You're invaluable," Sloan said. "But not everyone wants to be in the spotlight." And there it was. The final nail. I'd always believed my work would speak for me, that excellence was louder than self-promotion. Apparently, it wasn't. "Thank you," I said, my voice clipped, professional, "for letting me know." I stood up, carefully smoothing the front of my sweater. Sloane opened her mouth to say something else, maybe to offer a new title that meant less and paid the same, but I didn't wait. I left the room, and with it, the illusion that I was ever being groomed for leadership. As I walked back to my desk, passing people who had no idea what had just happened, one thought echoed through my mind like a whisper in a canyon. They didn't promote Mallory instead of me. They never even saw me in the running. I didn't go back to my desk. Instead, I walked straight out of the building and into the rain, still clutching the empty coffee cup I hadn't finished that morning. It was cold now, bitter, metallic. Like the moment itself. I stood under the awning of the parking garage, staring at the drizzle-soaked street, trying to decide whether to scream, cry, or laugh. None of those happened. Instead, my mind replayed 100 quiet moments that had led to this one. The moments that, at the time, I dismissed as normal, expected, maybe even fair. But now I saw them for what they really were. It started with the first intern I ever trained at Braverton. Her name was Jenna, and she came in bright-eyed, overconfident, and totally green. I walked her through the entire onboarding process, edited her first 5 client emails, and even fixed a typo in her first pitch deck 5 minutes before the meeting. She got a full-time offer before I did. I shrugged it off. Told myself it was about culture fit or departmental needs. But deep down, I remember feeling the first sting of being overlooked. Over the years, it became a pattern. I'd build the pitch. Someone else would present it. I'd mentor the new hire. They'd leapfrog me in 6 months. I'd fix the mess when a senior manager missed a deadline, and then they'd get the credit for pulling it together at the last second. And I took it. All of it. Not because I was weak, but because I thought being a team player meant swallowing my pride. I believed in the long game. I believed that someone was watching. That Sloane was watching. She wasn't. I remember one time about 5 years in when I found out the guy who joined 6 months after me, Caleb, was making $8,000 more. We had the same title. Same workload. I'd even trained him on our project management software. When I brought it up to HR, the answer was vague. Compensation varies based on market benchmarks, background, and individual negotiations. Translation: you didn't ask, so you didn't get. Even then, I didn't raise hell. I asked for a review. I got a $3,000 bump and a pat on the back. And still I stayed. I kept pushing. I took on extra responsibilities. Volunteered to mentor. Joined the diversity committee. Helped land 2 of our biggest accounts. Trained the new hires, managed the interns, absorbed the overflow when others quit. 'Cause that's what reliable people do. They show up. They don't cause drama. They stay late. They say yes, even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. And I was proud of that, you know? I liked being dependable. I liked being the one who could be trusted. I thought that meant something. But now, with Mallory getting the title, the pay bump, the company-wide announcement, after less than a year after building her reputation on work I had laid the foundation for, I realized something bone deep. In this company, reliability wasn't rewarded. It was used. I was used. 'Cause I made things easier. I didn't demand attention. I didn't self-promote or politic or push back. I thought that made me a good employee. Turns out it made me invisible. And maybe that started way before Braverton. Back in Indiana, growing up in a house with 2 brothers who were always louder, always more trouble, always more noticeable. One of them totaled my mom's car and still got ice cream on the way back from the tow yard. Me? I got straight A's and was told, "You're doing great, sweetie. Don't let us distract you." Being the easy child, the capable one, the girl who could figure it out on her own. It was a badge of honor. And a slow, quiet punishment. Because people stop checking in on the kid who seems fine. They assume the girl with good grades doesn't need help. They assume the employee who never complains is perfectly happy. I wasn't fine. I wasn't happy. I just didn't want to be a burden. But standing outside that office building, watching Mallory's reflection in the glass doors as she laughed with someone from marketing, I realized being quiet doesn't make you noble. It makes you forgettable. And I had allowed myself to be forgotten. I didn't quit that day. I wish I had. It would have made the story neater, cleaner. But life rarely plays out in crisp narrative arcs. No, I went back the next day. Sat at my desk like nothing had happened. Logged into the same software. Answered the same client emails. 'Cause I needed the paycheck. Because rent in Portland doesn't care about your dignity. 'Cause walking away without a plan felt like letting them win. But something had shifted. Where before I jumped to fix a typo or take a late client call, now I hesitated. Just for a second. Not enough to get noticed. But enough for me to notice. It was like watching a crack form in a mirror. Not a shattering. Just the first splinter. And once it's there, you can't unsee it. Mallory's promotion was officially announced that Friday in the company-wide Slack. Join us in congratulating Mallory Easton on her new role as Associate Creative Director. There were the usual emoji reactions, followed by a thread of polite congratulations. Sloan posted a glowing message about Mallory's vision and strategic mind, as if she hadn't been bouncing every idea off me for months. Mallory herself replied with a blushing hands emoji and couldn't have done it without the amazing team. The amazing team. That was me. I didn't respond. I didn't add an emoji. And for the first time in years, I left the office at exactly 5 p.m. No laptop in tow. No Slack notifications on my phone. I spent the weekend in complete silence. Didn't check email. Didn't open my planner. I sat in my small but warm apartment in the Overlook neighborhood, curled up in my worn corduroy chair, staring out the window and wondering, who was I outside of this job? For years, I'd built my identity around being the dependable one. The one who picked up the slack. The one who made things run smoothly. The one Sloan could rely on. The one who stayed when others left. I had built a reputation on being irreplaceable. And yet, I had just been replaced. I thought about all the moments I'd traded for work. The trips I didn't take because Q3 was crunch time. The birthdays I left early because the client deliverable came in hot. The dates I canceled. The friendships that faded. All for a company that replaced me the moment it became convenient. The following Monday, I returned to work with a strange, low-grade detachment humming beneath my skin. I noticed things I hadn't before. Like how Sloan avoided eye contact with me now. How Mallory had already redecorated the corner office that used to be empty. Framed prints, ring light, a curated stack of industry books she probably hadn't read. And then there was the pitch deck. A week after the promotion, Sloan asked me to review Mallory's upcoming pitch to a new tech client out of Seattle. Just polish it, she said breezily. Make sure the data points line up. You're so good at that. I opened the file and froze. It wasn't just a messy draft. It was my deck. Not just in style, but in content. In structure. She'd lifted entire sections from the framework I developed for our last campaign. Changed a few client names. Flopped out some industry references. But the bones were mine. No credit. No mention. Just taken. Like I was some kind of internal resource she could mine for parts. I stared at the screen for a long time, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. I could have called her out. I could have walked into Sloan's office and said, "This is plagiarism. This is theft." But I didn't. Because a deeper voice inside me whispered, "They already know. And they don't care." And in that moment, something hardened inside me. A new kind of clarity. Not the hopeful kind. Not the forgiving kind. Kind that comes when you finally stop making excuses for people who have shown you exactly who they are. That night, I went home, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for something special, and started digging. Old emails, shared drives, pitch decks, timestamps, internal messages. I pulled up my folders and saw in sharp relief just how much of the work carried my name quietly in the metadata, but never on the slides. I wasn't just overlooked. I was ghostwritten. And for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it fully. The betrayal. The exhaustion. The injustice. This wasn't just about a missed promotion anymore. It was about a pattern. A system. And now I had a pattern of my own. A folder I labeled receipts. The folder sat untouched on my desktop for almost a week. I'd named it receipts, but even that felt too clinical, too small for what it really was becoming. A record of being erased. A silent scream turned into evidence. Every night after work, I'd add to it a few lines from an old Slack thread. A time-stamped Google Doc that proved I'd drafted the deck. Calendar invites showing I'd led client meetings Mallory now referenced as her own. But still, I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something quieter. More dangerous. I wanted the truth. Documented. Undeniable. I thought I was alone in this. Until the day I ran into Tarek in the elevator. Tarek Hines had been with Braverton for 7 years. He ran UX strategy, brilliant guy, quiet like me but sharp as hell. We'd worked together on a dozen cross-functional projects over the years, and while we weren't close, we shared that unspoken understanding between the behind-the-scenes types. People who made things work while others collected applause. The elevator stopped on the 6th floor, where the creative department lived. I was headed to a client's sink. Tarek stepped in, coffee in hand, and gave me a polite nod. But then he said it. "Hey, congrats on the Mallory thing." I blinked. "Sorry." He raised an eyebrow. "You trained her, right? She's been telling people you mentored her through the whole Nolan pitch. That you practically handed it off to her so she could build visibility." I stared at him, speechless. "Didn't know that was part of the plan," he added more quietly. "It wasn't," I said. There was a long silence as the elevator hummed between floors. "She's been talking a lot," he said finally. "Dropping names. Taking credit. It's getting weird." The doors opened and he stepped out. But before the doors closed again, he turned and said, "If you ever want to compare notes, I've got a few stories." I stood there, frozen, as the elevator carried me to the top floor. The hallway outside the client boardroom felt different now. Like the air had shifted. Like the ground beneath me was starting to move. Later that day, I messaged Tarek. We met that evening at a little wine bar on Alberta Street, tucked between a pottery studio and a florist. It was dimly lit, quiet, the kind of place where whispered conversations felt protected. We ordered drinks, exchanged pleasantries, and then he opened his laptop. He had a folder too. Not just emails and meeting notes, he had recordings, screen captures, internal design mock-ups, timelines, evidence that Mallory had taken more than credit for my work. She'd borrowed ideas from Tarek's team too. Repackaged, renamed, presented as her own. And Sloan had signed off on all of it. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked quietly. "Because I thought I was crazy," he said. "Like maybe I was just bitter. But then I saw what happened to you, and I realized it wasn't just me. It's a pattern. A pattern." That word again. We spent hours going through his files, lining up timelines, comparing project names, aligning drafts. It was like peeling back layers of something rotten that had been polished to look brand new. By the end of the night, we had a picture that was starting to come into focus. Mallory hadn't just climbed the ladder. She'd skipped steps on the backs of the people holding it up. With help. Intentional help. I think Sloane's been grooming her for this since before she even got here, Tarek said. She moved across the country for this job. It wasn't random. I remembered Sloane's vague comments during Mallory's interview. She's brilliant. Unique background. We're lucky to have her. No disclosure that she was her daughter. No warning. No transparency. Just a calculated silence. And then something else clicked into place, something I hadn't thought about in months. My last performance review. It had been strange now that I looked back. Vague praise. No clear growth plan. Let's revisit promotions after Q4. When I pressed, Sloane said the team budget was tight, that new roles were frozen. And yet, somehow, Mallory got one. That night, after I got home, I opened the receipts folder and duplicated it. Then I opened Tarek's files and did the same. And I created something new. A folder called Pattern of Conduct. 'Cause I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. And I wasn't alone. The next day, I booked a quiet meeting room and printed everything. The emails. The side-by-side pitch decks. The timelines. Promotions. The silence. I didn't know exactly where this was going yet. But one thing was certain. They thought I would stay quiet. They were wrong. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. Instead, I lay in bed with my laptop open, staring at the compiled documents in the Pattern of Conduct folder. I'd printed 2 copies, one for me, one for HR. I read through everything at least 5 times, checking for holes, anything that could be twisted, dismissed, explained away. It was all airtight. But still, a voice in the back of my head whispered, "What if no one cares? What if they just protect her?" Again. By morning, the whisper had turned into resolve. I wore my favorite charcoal blazer, not to look polished but armored. Hair pulled back. Minimal makeup. Steady hands. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked into the glass-walled HR office on the 5th floor. Lena Baxter, the director of People and Culture, looked up from her laptop, startled but not unfriendly. "Rowan," she said, gesturing to a chair. "Did we have something scheduled?" "No," I said calmly, placing the manila folder on the table. "But we need to talk. Now." To her credit, Lena nodded slowly and closed her laptop. "I want to report a pattern of unethical behavior involving my manager and her daughter, Mallory Easton." Her expression changed instantly, brows drawing together, the kind of guarded look HR people are trained to hold when something big hits the table. I opened the folder and began walking her through the timeline. The data, the emails, the Slack messages, the duplications, the job titles, the missing disclosures, the theft of work. She didn't interrupt. Not once. By the time I was finished, Lena's expression was no longer neutral. "I'm assuming this has not been addressed directly with Sloane," she asked. "No," I said. "Because she's the architect of it." I slid the second folder across the table. This is corroborated by another senior team member, Tarek Hines. He's given permission to be contacted directly. Lena took a deep breath, tapping her fingers once against the folder before clasping them in front of her. "I need to be very clear with you, Rowan. What you're alleging here isn't just favoritism. It's a serious breach of internal ethics, preferential treatment, nepotism, potential plagiarism, and a failure to disclose a familial relationship that may have influenced hiring and promotion decisions." "I know." She nodded slowly. "I'll need to escalate this to legal and initiate a formal investigation. We'll reach out to you and Tarek for statements." "Good," I said, standing. "I just want the truth on record." Before I left, Lena looked up at me again. "Rowan." I paused at the door. "Whatever happens next, I want you to know, thank you." Most people never speak up. I didn't answer. I just nodded and walked out. The fallout was immediate. Subtle at first, then louder. By the next morning, Sloane's calendar had been cleared. Mallory wasn't at her desk. At lunch, whispers floated like smoke through the office. "Did you hear what happened?" Someone reported them. "There's an investigation." HR pulled the drives. She didn't even tell anyone they were related? By Thursday, the news was official, an internal memo from HR. Due to an ongoing investigation into an ethics complaint, Sloane Travers would be taking a temporary leave of absence. All team matters would be redirected to Interim Director Candace Nolan, our COO. The office buzzed with speculation. Most people didn't know the details. But the silence from Sloane and Mallory said enough. That afternoon, I was walking past the kitchen when I heard my name. "She's the one who blew the whistle," someone whispered. "Seriously? Rowan? Damn. I thought she was too quiet for that. Too quiet. Too steady. Too easy to overlook. Let them whisper. Let them be surprised. Let them finally see me." At 4 o'clock, I got the email. Subject: follow-up on ethics report. "Rowan, thank you again for your bravery in coming forward. We've begun internal review and have confirmed significant procedural violations related to both hiring practices and attribution of work. You will be contacted shortly regarding next steps. Lena Baxter, Director of People and Culture." I stared at the screen, heart pounding. For the first time in years, the weight I'd been carrying, quietly, invisibly, felt just a little lighter. Not gone. Not yet. But shifting. And in that shift, I found something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Power. Not the kind you're handed. Kind you reclaim. The strange thing about truth is that once it's out, it doesn't explode. It settles. Quietly. Like dust after demolition. After the memo went out, the office didn't erupt into chaos. No angry town halls. No dramatic shouting matches in glass rooms. Just an eerie kind of stillness. An awareness that something fundamental had cracked beneath us, and no one was quite sure where to step. Sloane never came back. Mallory submitted her resignation the following Monday. No goodbye email. No awkward cupcakes in the break room. Just a locked LinkedIn profile and a missing nameplate outside her office. Tarek and I never spoke about it again. We didn't need to. There was something sacred in the unspoken understanding we now shared. A silent nod in the hallway. The occasional dry smile when someone mentioned team restructuring. And me? I was still there. Still showing up every day. But something inside had shifted permanently. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove myself to anyone. Not to Sloane. Not to a room of executives. Not to a company that had built its brand on creativity but had forgotten how to recognize the people creating. I found myself breathing deeper. Slower. Taking lunch breaks outside. Not out of rebellion, but because I finally believed I was allowed. Tar offered me a promotion. Officially, the same title Mallory had held, Associate Creative Director. It was flattering. And completely insufficient. They wanted to make it right. But promotions given out of guilt aren't gifts. They're band-aids. And I wasn't interested in patching what was fundamentally broken. So I thanked them. Politely. Then declined. I think that shocked them more than anything else I'd done. But the truth was, I had nothing left to prove in that building. I had done what I came to do. Spoken up. Protected my work. Named what no one else dared to. Claimed my name, my reputation, my labor. Now I was ready for something else. Something more than survival. I gave my notice a month later. It was a short, simple email. Dear Candace, I'm grateful for the years I spent at Braverton, but it's time for me to step away and build something of my own. Thank you for the opportunities, the growth, and, finally, the clarity. Warmly, Rowan Mercer. I didn't have a job lined up. No safety net. Just a savings account I'd been growing carefully for years and a list of people I wanted to finally reach out to. Former clients, designers, strategists I'd mentored. Every single one of them responded with the same energy. What took you so long? 3 weeks later, I registered my LLC. Mercer Studio. Small at first. Just me and a handful of independent contractors. But it was mine. No title politics. No erasure. No stolen decks or performative promotions. Just clarity, autonomy, purpose, the kind of quiet, deliberate power I'd always believed in, now directed inward. And something unexpected happened. I started hearing from women. A copywriter from Boston who had lost her job after mentoring a man who was promoted above her. A UX lead in Chicago who'd had her research presented under someone else's name. A junior strategist in Oakland who wanted to quit but didn't know how to start. I didn't have answers for all of them, but I had my story. And I told it. Without shame. Without softening the parts that made people uncomfortable. Because strength isn't just the ability to endure. It's knowing when to stop enduring and start building. One morning, about 6 months after I left Braverton, I got a handwritten card in the mail. No return address. Inside it read, "Rowan, you were right. I should have listened. I see that now. I'm sorry. Them." I sat with it for a long time. Not because I needed the apology, but because it reminded me. Even those who benefited from the system can still learn from the ones who survived it. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Legacy was. And if my legacy was this, to be the quiet woman who finally stood up, who said no more, who chose herself, then I could live with that. Gladly. Some endings don't come with applause. No final meeting. No dramatic exit. No public vindication. Just stillness. Kind that lets you hear yourself again. After I left Braverton, I didn't look back. Not because I was bitter, but because I was finally beautifully free. I spent my mornings in quiet cafes, mapping out client strategies on blank white paper instead of corporate templates. I reconnected with people I respected, collaborated without hierarchy, said no to the wrong clients and yes to the ones who wanted more than buzzwords and polished decks. There was no title on my email signature, just my name, Rowan Mercer. Felt enough. I wasn't trying to climb anyone's ladder anymore. I was building my own floor. One day, I got a message from a former Braverton intern I'd mentored years ago. Her name was Eliza. She'd just been promoted at her new agency and wanted advice about negotiating salary, because last time she hadn't and she remembered how I once told her. If they say you're lucky to be here, they don't know what you're worth. She asked if I'd be open to doing a Zoom coffee chat. I said yes, of course. When the call started, she grinned and said, "I still remember how you stayed late with me that one night when I totally messed up the brand mood board." I'd forgotten. She hadn't. And that's when it hit me. Impact doesn't always show up in metrics. Sometimes it's just one person who remembered that you saw them, that you didn't let their mistake define them, that you stayed when no one else did. I stayed for 10 years. And then when it was time, I left. That's a different kind of strength. Not the flashy kind. Not the kind they write about in company newsletters. But the kind that lives quietly in your chest. The kind that says, I can lose this title, this job, this room, and still be whole. People like to talk about the strong ones as if we're made of steel. As if we don't bleed. As if being capable means we don't need care, recognition, fairness. But here's what I've learned. Being strong isn't the absence of need. It's the courage to claim what you do need, and to stop apologizing for it. It's not independence instead of support. It's independence with support. And if people can't see that, you walk anyway. Not out of pride, but because you finally remember your value and you're done negotiating it down. So here I am, not on a pedestal, not behind a podium, just sitting at a small desk in a sunlit room I pay for with my own money, doing work I believe in with people who see me. No more proving, no more waiting to be chosen. I choose myself now. And that, it turns out, was always the promotion I truly needed.